Are you interested in angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, and monsters? Are you curious about their origins, influence, and how to protect against the unknown? If so, then welcome to Southern Demonology, the podcast that explores all of this and more. Hello all, welcome back to Southern Demonology. As always, I am your friendly neighborhood ancient demonologist, JJ, and I have a good friend on the show with us today. I have been on his podcast, Garden of Doom. What is it, 4 times now? 3 times?
It's
Can't even.
at least 4 times.
Yeah, and discussing everything from Shintoism to the Ethiopic Orthodox Church to the Nephilim and a few other topics, and had a great time doing it. And in case you have never ran across the Garden of Doom, I wanted this to be your first introduction and a hearty recommendation from me. Mr. Jeff, you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Sure. I'm Jeff Lippman. JJ introduced himself as the ancient demonologist. I'm like an ancient novice, but I think maybe I'm getting to an intermediate level, not of a demonologist, but maybe of a esoteric eclectic. About 6 months ago, I started Garden of Doom. Really liked the name, but I started with a partner, and we that didn't last very long. But the name had a certain tie to what we were going to do at the time. I also lost some guests due to the name, which was a little silly. And a few times along the line, there were people who I really just didn't feel belonged on a show called Garden of Doom. Perhaps I was overthinking it. So I had a spinoff called Garden Views. And then just because of cancellations and reschedulings and keeping the order of the shows, I just scrapped them both and I folded them into something called Garden of Thought. So I figured I no longer have to distinguish what's the weekend show, what's the midweek show, and so it's actually under Garden of Thought, but all the old Garden of Doom shows are there. All the old Garden Views shows are there. Shows that I didn't even number. There were bonuses or extra. Some were bonuses because they truly were bonuses. Some I didn't number because maybe I didn't exactly want to claim them. But and there's actually also a third title under there, which started as the Book of Black because my co-host was PJ Black, and it's now the Gospel of Thomas because my co-host is Mr. Thomas. And if you don't know who those people are, that just means that you're somewhat normal. They're both pro wrestlers. Actually, PJ's retired. PJ was Justin Gabriel in WWE for 5 years. If you watch WWE, late aughts to the early teens, and Mr. Thomas currently is in Major League Wrestling. And we talk to people in wrestling, but generally not about wrestling stuff. And with PJ, he's a true esoteric. He just joined the Freemasons. So the stuff we went deep with folks on that show. Actually, at least one of the guests has been on Garden of Thought and is booked to be on again. A guy named Aaron Stevens, who in WWE was Damian Sandow. So again, he was sort of the guy who was the understudy for The Miz. He was like his stunt double, if you remember that shtick. Anyway, so those are sort of the 3 faces of Garden of Thought. Probably more than you were banking on, but they're all on Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, Podbean, iHeart, you name it. They're all over the place.
Speaking of Freemasonry.
Yep. That's right. At some point you may find yourself as a co-guest with either Aaron Stevens and or PJ Black or there's a bunch of wrestlers who are Freemasons.
I would absolutely love that. No, I love the in-depth. In fact, let me ask you about the cancellations because I have suffered from that more than a few times myself. What was it about the name that gave people such hesitation, do you guess?
Well, the first two, they weren't cancellations. They just were declines.
Mhm.
Strangely, they were sisters. I knew their father through my father, who's 84 now. And one of them was a counterterrorism expert, and the other one ran a major urban hospital. Both of them would have been probably for the Garden Views title, but because the Garden of Doom was the feed it was on, they're like, I don't want to be on a show called Garden of Doom. Now, there were a couple who, this might fit into the Southern, but they're not going to do it. Anyway, the cancellations wasn't so much because of the name Garden of Doom. It was just because of I mean, whenever you book podcasts, you have some guests, some cancel, some no show, some have very legitimate reasons. Some seem to come up with excuses, reschedule, come up with excuses, reschedule again, come up with excuses. And some actually post, but most just ghost you for reasons unknown. The reason for the name change is because of the cancellations and rebookings with other guests. I couldn't really keep the order. It was harder to make, the weekend show, the Garden of Doom show, and the midweek show, the Garden View show, because I was sometimes scrambling for guests. Now I always
Mm,
had 2 or 3 shows. At one time I had 9 shows in the tank, so it wasn't a worry. Right now I currently have no shows in the tank theoretically, though I do have one Gospel of Thomas that's with the producer to be produced, and I do have one Garden of Thought that my wife hasn't. She's my producer. She hasn't edited yet. The Gospel of Thomas one, an outside producer does though. The actual producer of Wrestling Supercus is a wrestling tie-in. But that was more the reason. But I've had a spate. Like the last 12 weeks, I've probably had more cancellations than actually shows that have happened. And it's sort of very frustrating. And, for a while, it was like, is this my sign? And then I'm like, no, shut up. You're overthinking things as always.
yeah, have we all run into strings of bad luck, but I'm sorry about that. And I hope that definitely reverses course because you have always been a very fun and engaging interviewer. So I can't imagine people not wanting to talk to you.
Well, a couple of them have come back. And I think for the most part, I think a lot of it has nothing to do with me. I mean, I think some people, A, they got too busy, or they're a little bit broken and probably got more broken. And, while podcasting doesn't seem like it's necessarily a big taxing thing for someone to do, if everything's taxing for you to do, then it is. I mean, listen,
You know,
and I'm not being judgy. Probably 10 or 11 years ago, I was, at what you might call rock bottom. Getting out of bed and brushing my teeth was like a big ordeal. If you had asked me to podcast then, I mean, hey, the answer would be why. But, uh, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I probably would have said yes, and I might have ghosted someone as well. So, but some of them came, I think some of them were sort of caught up in other things, real or emotional. Some people were just really in, Trump 2.0 funks, which I guess I sort of get. And a couple have come back, and we'll see. My show has always benefited and suffered from variety. It's sort of genre defined. So, and I don't have the celebrity of like a Joe Rogan. So, it's not like people are going to listen to me no matter what. But anyway, this is not a tale of woe. I've got bookings, all the way into the fall, and hopefully my little spate of cancellations is over and all is happy. Malak, leave me alone.
so speaking more of your podcast in general, what's been your most unexpectedly mind-blowing interview or topic that you've had on the show so far?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is blow a little smoke your way, because the Ethiopian Bible show that you did, which was July of 2024, is still routinely in my top 15 shows listened to every single month.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. Will be dang.
Yeah. And listen, don't get me wrong. It was a great show. It's a fascinating topic, but
Yep.
it is so stubbornly persistent. I mean, there have been months where it's like near the top 4 or 5 over the more recent shows, that's unusual. I mean, I've had some strange. Okay, but the probably the strangest show. Okay, I've had 2 that I would say really took me off guard. One was with a fairly well known New World Order Illuminati whistleblower, and he does make it to all the lists. Who comprises or puts together those lists, I don't know, but his name is, he goes by either Leo Young or Leo Zagami. It's the same person. I had him as Leo Zagami, but when his e-newsletter, which still comes, it's generally under Leo Young. Anyway, he was telling me that Satan is basically in our computers, that the actual, biblical, historical Satan lives within the technology. And there was a bit of an irony that we were doing an interview on a podcast over computers and the internet and all that. And I asked him about that. He's like, well, I mean, I had to make a choice. Not everyone's buying my 8 or 12 books. this is how I get the message out. So it's a calculated risk. So okay, fair enough answer. And his solution to the problems, and since a few other people said the same thing, is pray and live a pastoral life more simply. Basically, sort of Grizzly Adams with some amenities, which strikes me as being near impossible in this day and age, unless you're like Bear Grylls is. He used to be like
Yeah.
Man versus Wild. So unless you're like you have his skills, like I think it would be very difficult. Another it was a wrestler. He went by Raider, which is not his actual real wrestler name. That's how he went by Raider, because I guess he's a Raiders fan, and he's a luchador. So he wears a mask anyway, but he wasn't wearing his wrestling mask. He was just wearing so he was using a fake name and a fake mask to double hide his identity. And he went he's also a Mason, and he said things, I mean, probably things that nobody who listens to shows like ours or has left YouTube alone on, and the algorithm feeds them stuff long enough. But into the Rothschilds, and the way back when the Raphaim, it was the Raka Khan Rothschilds, which is the Jews. I'm like, I don't know how Raka Khan makes Rothschilds, 4,000 years later, but you know, and it was the only time that I felt the need to put a disclaimer on one of my show notes. And I talked to PJ about it because it's his friend, and I didn't want to be like, wow, this is good. And he's like, yeah, I actually thought that I was thinking the same thing. Actually, he's like that was a little much. I'm like, okay, cool, because that's fine. It's fine because PJ is at least last I mean, I talk to him all the time, but I don't get into his personal. Last I knew about his personal life, he was converting to Judaism, and he was marrying an Israeli girl. I mean, they both live here in the U.S. He's South African. Just out of curiosity, I should ask him if if he's converted to Judaism or not, because that is an easy trip. You don't just get to go in the water and say, accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and you're reborn. Jews don't make it hard. It's like a 2 or 3 year ordeal of like all sorts of like baths and trainings and tests and whatever. It's like going to graduate school.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, like I went through the same thing when I converted from Protestantism over to Catholicism. I wanted to take my time with it. I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I was getting into. And it didn't help that at the time I was also dating a Catholic girl. And I wanted to make sure that my feelings for her were not unnecessarily or unduly influencing my decision to convert. So I took 2 or 3 years and made really, really dang sure that, yes, this is what I wanted. So I think it's a good process. That, and the easier something is, the less it means.
So if you are a people who still have not recovered population wise from the Holocaust, there's still less of you net in the world than there was 80 years ago. You think you'd make the cost of entry a little bit easier, but no. So I guess there's something for, depending on who you listen to, 5,000 years of continuity, as I've come to learn in my garden journey, probably much closer to, 3,200 years, 3,000 years, maybe 2,500 years, exactly when all the continuity and when actually sort of, Hebrews turned to Judeans, turned to Israelites, turned to Jews, and when Judaism was actually a sort of a singular religion. When was the Torah actually written? Was it on that mountain? Well, I guess it's Mount Sinai. Over 70 days or whatever, or was it maybe more in Babylon? A few centuries later. So that's those are interesting questions, because like Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, and I'm like, the New Year of what? Like, it's literally the New Year of in the beginning, let there be light. Is sort of that's and I'm like, it is. But, I don't know. I thought it was like the covenant with Abraham. Nope, not that, or the founding of a temple. No, it's like literally that's like in the beginning, I guess, when God made blew the winds that separated the heavens from the waters, and Didn't depending on which list in Genesis. I mean, man came on the sixth day or the second day, depending on which page you're reading. So, I mean, I guess minus 1 day or 6 days really doesn't make a difference between friends when you're talking 5,800 years. But still, the when does something start is, I was having the same discussion actually on the Gospel of Thomas, which is not a religious show. It's just because my guy is Thomas and I saw the Book of Black. Like, we were talking to Vicious Vicky Venuto, who's a female wrestler, obviously. And I'm like, we just celebrated our, the 4th of July. It's year 249. But is it? We declared our independence, but we didn't gain it. The British didn't surrender until 1781. The Constitution wasn't even written until like 1787 and wasn't ratified until a couple of years later. So really, is the United States 249 years old, or is it more like 236 years old? Or when the thing starts? I mean, this is probably not the rivulet that you thought we were going to go down.
Oh, no, no, no. It's always a fascinating subject because it is the more particular items that you consider, the harder it is to nail something down. But all I know is that the passage that you were speaking about has some of the most beautiful Hebrew that has ever been written. Rehaya or Yihye, or let there be light, and there was light. It's just
Very poetic.
anyway, absolutely.
Yeah. And it in like 13 different languages. So, I mean, which is extremely
Yeah, it's
impressive.
always fun. But I too have had a guest in which I've had to slap a disclaimer on. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think I have only done that one time myself. And just the ideas were so alien to what I thought could or should be possible that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to sound like I am endorsing this myself.
And to not sound like a total hypocrite, but even after I felt like the conversation with Leo was a little bit manic, and I'm not sure that I subscribe to much of what he says. After hearing like a lot of the billionaires and the tech people speak and hearing the disagreements between people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and different futurists, from the very positive ones to the in the middle to the whoever the transhumanists, there's a spectrum of that. I'm not so sure that Leo wasn't wrong. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's actually Satan there, but I'm not sure that there's really much good going on in these machines. And yes, it's a tool, and everything's a tool, and we always overcome tools. But I don't know. This tool is pretty ubiquitous, and it's easy to fool people, and the damage has already been done over the last 20 to 40 years where nobody believes anything, to the point where there are chemists posting there's no such thing as chemtrails. I'm like, yeah, I would really like to repost this, but what if in 25 years it turns out there are such a thing as chemtrails? And like, it's like, I'm like, it's like there's no certainty of anything. I consider myself a critical thinker, but like, critical thinking can become a uh, so what's the word I'm looking for? Like an obsession where it never ends.
Yeah, true. But speaking of Musk and Teal are the ultimate tools, and I've hated them long before it even became remotely popular to do so. So, my God, that most recent interview that Teal gave to, what was it, the Wall Street Journal?
No, it was Ross Dowd,
Yeah,
who's
thank
actually
you.
a New York Times. He's like their young conservative editorialist, columnist. But yeah, when he said, "Do you believe humanity deserves to live?" and like there's like a 45-second pause before he gets to
Yeah, and he hemmed and hawed. And if you can't answer a basic softball question like that, then you got some major issues going on.
Yeah, I mean, if your name isn't Thanos, Galactus, or Ultron, I mean, that shouldn't be the answer. I mean, you want to talk about overpopulation, scarcity of resources, and whatever, but the actual existence of humanity, if you are in fact a leading human, that's a bit of a troublesome one.
That would be accurate. Let me ask you this. So you described yourself as an esoteric apprentice, and I actually really like that turn of phrase. That's a very interesting one. What's your process like when you're prepping for a guest whose topic is outside of your wheelhouse? How do you go about doing that?
It's a really great question, and to assume I have a process is such a beautiful compliment. This has really been a journey, and it really has been an exploration into things that, sort of almost accidentally stumbling into learning about things that I didn't know about, and I'm really too lazy to study myself. So I have somebody like you on to tell me about it. But I'm a good listener, and I'm good at making connections and issue spotting. So I'm trained as a lawyer, but I've always read a lot. I'm not saying I read all the classic, but I've read a lot. I mean, I put in those like the Da Vinci Code type of religious thrillers and the techno thrillers that all have like the fringe science in there. And what if this happens? And what if that happens? And I read comic books when I was a kid. So I have, played Dungeons and Dragons and, I read about mythology and King Arthur. So the foundation of things are there. It's just, I never put them together. And after listening to enough people, I started making connections. Now, some of them were absurd. Some of them were just like, kid connections. And I've had people say to me, no, 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 you're confusing correlation with causation. That's not a cognate, or they're saying they're the same character. It's just a different name. It's language drift. Sure, it's the same, but they didn't need to pray for water here because they had water. They needed to actually, pray for the sunlight because it was always raining here or whatever. So, that lead god, wisdom overtook, or sacrifice became more important than being the Lord of Thunder, and things like that. But so the process is find guests who are going to tell me about things that I think I'm not going to know about them. Most of them don't. I mean, a lot of people sort of repeat what other people have said, but they're still interesting. Everybody is different in their own way, their own journey, and whatnot.
Mm,
And I don't know, through it all, I feel like I understand the world, but there's still so much that I don't understand. But the scariest part is that I understand how little we actually know or agree on, right down to there is no actual agreement. What is the definition of life? Like biologists disagree if bacteria is like and microbes are like the end of life, or if, and whether a virus is life or not. And apparently a virus can't reproduce until it's in another host, but it does reproduce at that point. It adapts to survive. I mean, that sounds like life to me. So there's there's not even a consensus as to what's like, there's not a consensus as to where continents end or even what a continent is. I mean, it's like all these things that we take for granted. Like in my industry, it's called legal fictions. If you file your deed of title with land records, the government says you own this, acreage of land. And legal fiction is it's posted. The entire world knows that and will respect it. We just have these things out there, and then you have someone like Putin, who's like, Ukraine is always part of Russia. No, it wasn't. Well, it was sometimes, and they speak Russian. They also speak Ukrainian. I mean, there's probably 2 million Russian speakers. It was probably, I don't know, 100,000 Russian speakers in Metro Baltimore. Is that part of, if six of them say we want to be part of Russia, does that give them a claim of right on Baltimore? I mean, so it's just like the world it's a delicate balance. If it's even a balance, and whether you love Trump or you don't like Trump, basically he's just a guy who sort of does things first and says, I don't care what those things say. And then, some of the rules might apply, some of them might, some of the rules might apply and they can stop them. Some of the rules are applied and they don't stop him. Some of the rules he makes himself and decides not to, like the whole TikTok ban. He's the one who got that through Congress.
yep.
And then he's like, I'm not going to enforce it.
Yeah, the TikTok has been in a flurry as of late because there were all these rumors that it was going to be sold to Oracle, and everyone was posting all of these shorts of, yeah, I'm not going to move over to the new app, whatever it's called. And then, of course, TikTok came out and said, well, no, that was all false speculation. That didn't happen. And now then there's all this talk about the a current in the South Ocean that had completely reversed course, and that too was completely fake. And it's just, yeah, you never know what you're going to get. It's a mixed bag on that one.
Yeah, never. Absolutely never. You're absolutely right. So I don't know if I really answered, but my process is mostly to listen, to try to ask intelligent questions. And I guess I'm smart enough and I've heard from enough people that I can ask intelligent questions, or at least they pass enough for intelligent questions that the intelligent guest can answer them properly or steer the question in the correct direction, which can lead to actual intelligent questions. So I'm also not afraid to be wrong, because the whole premise of the show is me learning about things that I don't know about already. So I don't expect to be right. I expect some of my questions for them to go, "Now you're entirely wrong about that." Okay, cool. All right. Well, tell me why I'm wrong and tell me what it really is, and that's great. Also,
Yep.
you know, if I don't know the definition of what a rare earth metal is, tell me. That's great. That I'm the straw person for the audience, because most people don't know squat either. There's a whole lot of people, more people closer to me than to the expert in, geology or volcanology or Vulcans, or Southern demons.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one. Even though I might know more than the average common person when it comes to, Second Temple Judaism or the Ethiopic Orthodoxy, it doesn't mean that I know jack squat about anything else. And I rely upon me's or subject matter experts in order to elucidate me on that. So I am, uh, I am right there with you on that one.
Yeah, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you get the right homeowners insurance.
So going back to that one time that you added a disclaimer on things, if you're covering fringe theology or paranormal lore that you necessarily may not believe in, how do you balance that of skepticism and open-mindedness?
Probably similarly to you. I mean, I early on I adopted that I am inviting guests on. They said yes, sort of like the old-fashioned guest privileges. As long as the guest is not abusive to me,
Mhm.
and they're answering my questions, I'm going to let them know. It doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not. I'm asking questions. I'm there on a information finding mission, and I almost said fact finding. It's not necessarily a fact finding mission. It might be facts to that person. They may be facts in fact, but it's an information find. For instance, I didn't know what the Black Israelites were, and I found a school. That's what they call their houses, schools, where the captain and the lieutenant would speak to me. And it turns out what I thought was Black Israelite isn't. You probably know what it is, because that's right down your alley. Now I know what Black Israelite is, at least from their perspective. And then a lot of people are telling me they're this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, well, that's not what he said, but maybe you're making the same mistake I did, and maybe you're confusing them with Beta Israelites, which is a different thing, which I haven't found an expert on yet, or maybe you're confusing it with Rastafari. I mean, there's a large African diaspora with a whole diverse panoply of beliefs. But for all I know, there could be different sects within Black Israelitism as well. I mean, there could be 23 different, subgroups, that have arguments about, like the divinity of Mary or whatever. I don't know. I only spoke to one school, but I mean, I certainly didn't agree that there were no Black people in Africa, or maybe a few got over there, and the transatlantic slave trade what wasn't Black people, that those are Hamites and they don't count. I mean, but somehow every Native American and Latino is somehow Black and an Israelite. But what we traditionally think of as Black, meaning African, aren't. And somehow Asians don't count. People from the Indian subcontinent and Sumatra and Bangladesh and so not or I don't remember but whatever it was the logic of it doesn't make sense to me. But that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't for it to make sense to me. The goal was to tell me what their logic is, what their tenets are, what their beliefs are. And and learn about that, and that's what I did. It's not for me to judge. It's for the back in the day, when Bill O'Reilly used to have the show. I mean, he was full of it even back then, but he'd say, "We report, you judge, or you decide." I actually mean that. So, and I don't really report. I just, help to, I'm just sort of Virgil here and helping to, guide and find get the information and hopefully get the right voices on things that, the listener hasn't heard about or at least wants to hear another voice on or hear about it. I mean, there's certain things that, UFOlogy. I mean, there's not a lot of new information there, or if there is, you can question the, people saying, well, we know the nine races of aliens. Well, okay, we don't really know, but but it's great listening. So that's my process, is just to be a good listener and try to remember as much as humanly possible, and be an interactive, but to not make judgments with the guests, because they're the guests. They, you give them tea, you give them hospitality, you make sure they have a meal, that nobody's going to kill them in the middle of the night. And then when they go, if I'm not going to talk bad about them when they go, because but once they go, then it's like, ah, well, then knives are out or whatever. But they're granted safe passage.
I like that distinction of going on a information hunting expedition rather than trying to ferret out something like the truth. That's an interesting way of putting that.
Sometimes there's a moving target, and other times it isn't. And that's one of the frustrating things with this era, because everything feels to be like it's a moving target, things that shouldn't be. But
Yeah,
lots of
that's
things are.
true.
There's room for lots of things that are. Religion. I mean, I mean, what happens when we die? What's a soul? I mean, there's lots of room for reasonable good faith, discussion and debate. And there's lots of room for bad faith too. I mean, Divinity of Mary is a pretty good example of one of the things that's led to the death of a lot of people. Whether that's theological or it's just to make sure that there aren't any female goddesses in monotheism. It's like sort of the, all of the female goddesses were for, sort of in the pantheons. And and at some point, there's the Mother Earths and Gaia and as the supreme, the Holy Mother, Sacred Mother. But sort of, I don't know if Judaism was the first or not. Probably not, because no one's ever the first. But maybe Zoroastrianism or whatever. But at some point, it sort of all the dudes got in charge, and then then the Christians sort of couldn't decide whether Mary giving birth was because she was divine or she was just the perfect vessel. Then it seems like Islam took it all back and said, "Don't worry about any of that. He's human. He was a prophet. Is one God. It's definitely a dude. Men rule, girls drool."
It's always an interesting question.
Talk about dumbing it down, right?
Hey, you got to start somewhere. I'm telling you. What's the one topic that you think is still totally underrated or misrepresented in the broader, I guess you could loosely call it the umbrella of the paranormal podcasting world? I know it's kind of a large topic.
Well, it's enormous, and there's so much. I think really that this is going to sound silly, because we all think of like Miss Cleo and horoscopes and fortune cookies, but astrology really is pretty much everything. Like, astrology is so huge on how it influenced so much of everything. I don't think that can possibly be talked about enough. Just how, I mean, the whole 12 and 12, hours and 12 months, and how we fit so much into, just to fit within a zodiac. A bunch of geniuses at different times basically decide to use the same kind of measuring scale and figured out that if you divide the circumference of our ecliptic, you can do it into perfect 30 degrees, and you come out with 360 days in a year, even though there's 365 or 365 point like 142 or whatever it is. Uh, and at some point agreed upon symbols, and at some point a certain group of symbols sort of took over and became, and just to the point where even things like the calendars are. I mean, we're in the year 2025. No, we're not. I mean, you know, but you know we're in the year 5785. No, we're not. I mean, unless you actually believe that, when, that beautiful phrase was uttered, that actually was the beginning. But it's just, I mean, I had a guest, actually, I'm talking to him again later this weekend. We're recording, it'll be his third time, Bernie Taylor. And he studied some cave paintings that are dated back to 34,500 years ago. And it's very clear that that was a zodiac. Most of it is the same zodiac as now, though some of them were different figures at the time. And it's basically, I mean, obviously it depends where you start, but it's basically the hero's journey, at least 34,000 years ago, and probably by the time someone or someone's figured out how to paint it on a wall in a paint that was permanent, that was like the pyramids. That was their first attempt wasn't Giza. Their first attempts are crumbles in the dark. So just amazing. And that still influences us today in so many invisible ways. I read a book. I think the author's name I think it was William Napier, but I know there's a famous Napier. This guy is an author. It's not the same guy. And he did a whole book basically having to do with it had something to do with the Roanoke, issue with a colony in Roanoke disappeared overnight. And he tied it into this whole thing about how it was over competing Christian sects to control whether we were going to use the Juliana calendar or the Gregorian calendar. It's a very good story. It was very easy to read. I don't remember enough about it, but I mean, people still talk about the missing 300 years. No, they just counted it differently. It's like nothing's missing, but people still debate about missing 300 years. And some people say that was Tartaria. That was the age of Second Atlantis. And I mean, you could use this information for, if you have an audience anyway, or if you were extreme enough to find an audience, for very diabolical purposes.
Yeah, and I think the modern incarnation of Coast to Coast AM kind of at least a lot of that. But I don't touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole because there's a lot there. But yeah, that actually, I was going to say something and like just completely, it's amazing. And I think that you're right because if you look at, especially at Asian countries, you will see belief in the zodiac everywhere to the point where, it's still a trope of you're watching the morning news and they will do astrology rankings and, oh, if you're a sign of the dragon, then you're going to be great this morning. And if you're not, then you're going to have a horrible day. Or even more basic, like in Japan, they truly believe in blood types, where if you are blood type A, then you are extremely outgoing and personable. And if you're B, then you're essentially a beta and you just let people roll over you all the time. It's just it's fascinating how people make these snap judgments in order to categorize people quickly and then place them in that bucket and then go about their day.
I mean, my wife is Ecuadorian. She every year things get moved around and little pairs of dolphins and frogs and turtle statues and paintings get moved around and tables are reoriented, all because of feng shui. And okay, it's great. We have a little Chinese New Year celebration or Lunar New Year celebration. Unfortunately, it's fish. I don't like fish, but that's fine. It's a whole big thing. I mean, her and her son spend the whole day, cooking like a whole head-on fish and all of this stuff.
My wife and my girls, they do the exact same thing for Lunar New Year. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's all there. And for I don't know, 35 years, and probably going to a Chinese restaurant once a week, looking at that paper, placemat with zodiac signs that aren't mine, and wondering what this is all, and it barely registers. You just know that it's different. It's the year of the monkey and the year, and don't even think about what it is. And at some point, someone says, "Well, it's the lunar zodiac." Okay, well, what's that? I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't know if people even think about what the zodiac came from, and like basically mathematicians and people looking to figure out how to measure movement, because that's how you measure time. I mean, and then it turned into navigation. It's just amazing. I've come up with a couple of like theories which are original to me, whether they're original to the world through me or not, I don't know. But that like a lot of the chimera that we have, a lot of like the creatures and the myths and even some of the stories that go with them were basically maps so that, people could get around in different times of year. And so they told different stories so they knew which stars to follow do it. Of course, then there's clouds, which sort of throw a wrench into that one. And of course, if you believe in the paranormal and you believe that, there's got to be some explanation for cryptids, I posited, well, why can't cryptids just be ghosts of extinct creatures? I mean, why are ghosts limited to, humans and domestic animals? Why is it only horses, dogs, cats, and humans? I mean, you don't think those bison that were run off the cliff, that they don't suffer any trauma and maybe, hold a grudge, or, the wolf who languished for 7 days in a bear trap, trying to bite its leg off, its paw off, didn't die with some trauma and then unfinished business. And maybe that's the dire wolf, or maybe that's the saber-toothed cat, or maybe that's the giant sloth, the Gigantopithecus, which when it presents as a ghost, it does sort of phase in and out. And there explains your Bigfoot that you think is interdimensional, and well, yeah, it's just a fun little theory to tie in ghosts and cryptids and try to make some sense of it. I mean, it's still nonsense, not in that it's not exactly rooted in sense, but if you believe in the paranormal, then why not? That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, especially where I grew up. There's all these now, all of these accounts on TikTok and other social media things that essentially try to paint Appalachia as the birthplace of all evil, and that there are rules that everyone follows. There's even one idiotic creator that went on and started talking about how there was a dead tree that was following her around on her property. I'm just like, okay, that's completely overblown, and it irritates the ever living shit out of me. But that's neither here nor there. I got two last questions for you before I'll let you go.
Well, first, I mean, does that tree like put on a trench coat and put on glasses and a like a fedora so you can't recognize it?
That would at least make it more interesting, but no, that's not even what happens. It's essentially, it's a branch that is being moved from one part of the yard to the other, and then she films it, and it's like, "Oh, look, it's following me here and here." Like, oh, it's just crazy. So first, what would you say is your white whale? I guessed your subject that you've always wanted to have on your podcast and have yet to achieve that.
I have two white whales, and they both should be, actually, I have three, and they all two of them should be easy to achieve. The third one is hard. One, I want someone who's actually versed in international law enforcement. I'd like to get someone from Interpol or FBI that was stationed in an international field office that was tasked with like a joint task force with like MI5 or whatever. I am fascinated on how that works. I would like to extrapolate that what might be one day in space, or maybe more likely in international waters.
Mhm.
Another one is I simply want, I'm not sure if it's a geographer or cartographer or maybe some combination of both. I just want to know what the difference is between like things like streams, rivers, brooks, and what's the difference between a K and a bay and a gulf and a sea, and when does a sea become an ocean, and where is this concept of seven seas, and what's the difference between a mountain and a hill, and why does what looks like the same mountain range to me, why does it have four different names when it branches off here and there, and just like, which would probably be like extraordinarily boring to people, but I would like those answers, and to find out if in fact there are answers, or is just yet more things. Is every atoll a volcano or not? You just stuff like that. And then the original white whale and closest to the white whale question is, I want someone to talk to me about the octopus. I want to know everything about the octopus and why there's this whole thing about their DNA is so unique and different, and just how smart are they really? And could they have been seeded by aliens, or by a meteorite coming? I mean, whenever you say could, the answer is yes. But things octopus fascinating. So those, There's another one, but I could actually someone sent me an article on it, which is apparently there's 5 different animals which eventually evolved into crabs. So now I don't want to read the article. I have it. I could read it, but so that would not be a white whale. But anyone who can talk about that, you're more than welcome on to talk about, so that I don't have to read the article, and further so that everyone who listens to my show from now until eternity doesn't have to read any articles.
Have you ever ran across the YouTube channel Map Men?
I don't think I have.
It's a pair of comedians, but they dissect everything about maps and go into extreme detail around it. In fact, when we were first talking about the problem of dating things, they had an entire episode all about how many countries there are in the world. And they went into extreme detail, but in a very humorous way. They may actually be a phenomenal set of guests if you can get them on because they do some good work.
It sounds like they'd be perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's nothing. There's no agreement, even close, on the amount of countries in the world.
Yeah, and they are actually, like, considering, different criteria and taking things in and out, and it was fascinating. It really was. And my last question for you is, if someone is brand new to your show, what's the one episode that you would point them to in order for them to understand what garden is all about?
Such a phenomenal question. It's such a difficult question. First of all, I have over 400 episodes between the 3 titles that are out there. So, and like in the beginning, especially when it was just me after my partner left and went on to do other things and I was trying to do it myself, like there's such challenges with the audio and, stumbling for a personality and an identity for the show, but I still have such fondness for certain shows. But what would be I've had a guest, his name is Andrew Goff. He's been on a bunch of times. He has some controversial views, but he's very well spoken. He's done some TV gigs. I think he has a show on Gaia right now. And he's done some really interesting shows. I think maybe though, to the be all and end all, and it's a whole thesis and a history of human beings and our relationship with bees and how that fit into our mythology, religion. And I just remember that show being like, wow, I did not expect this to be interesting at all. And this is freaking fascinating.
Hmm.
All of the Goff shows are good. I was in a show with a lawyer who I knew from the Maryland Lawyers Facebook page. She's been on a bunch. Her name's Jennifer Sutherland. And we did poetry and sort of, I think it was like the poetry of metal or the poetry of, anyway, she like went into this whole thing about, and she's we've done the fall of Usher, the Poe series on Netflix. We talked about that. She's done, I think, either Halloween or Scary Christmas with me. So she's been on much time. She's been great. But it was like the whole thing. She was like talking about how Iron Maiden, always does a certain kind of arpeggio or whatever, and it's a poetry device, and just there was just fascinating stuff in there that I didn't know what I was getting into, but I mean, it turned out to be terrific. I thought it was terrific. But yeah, I would maybe go the be all and end all, also because I thought that was a really clever name for a show based on bees. I'm very proud of myself for that one. Yeah, start with that, I guess.
That's a phenomenal answer. And I'll cut this part out, but are you in Maryland?
I am.
I am right next to you in Northern Virginia, actually.
Are you? Where in Northern Virginia are you?
I'm in a little suburb called Manassas Park.
Well, I mean,
It's
my law firm, the 2 Northern Virginia offices, which I would argue are the home base, though the managing partner who's in Chicago would argue that that's the home base. But the 2 main offices are Leesburg and Tysons. I'm going to be in Tysons the end of this month. Really wanted to go to Leesburg, but they're like, well, the event's in Tysons, so you should come down there for the day and work there for the day. I'm like, yeah, Tysons is so uninteresting.
I used to live right next door across the bridge from Tyson's and Falls Church. Yeah, so I will be danged.
Yeah, well, there
It's
you
a
go.
small world.
For whatever reason, I thought you lived much further south. I thought that you were sort of like, somewhere between, somewhere Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama.
I grew I grew up in Tennessee, but yeah, I moved after I came back from Japan. I We settled in Northern Virginia, and been here ever since.
Listen, so this Maryland, Northern Virginia. I think Maryland and Virginia are pretty similar in a lot of ways. Very pleasant part of the world. I mean, I know that the taxes are high and all that, but I don't care. I think
And traffic's awful, but beyond that, it's a fantastic melting pot to be in. I love it.
I do too. I very sad. People are like, do you want to go on vacation? Not really. I don't go to the airport. I don't want to go through. I mean, I'm sure there's places there more beautiful. I'm like, don't you want to see the world? I'm like, not really. I've been to Las Vegas. I've been to Epcot. That's enough.
Yeah, pretty much every year we just go back to Japan for a month and we come back, and I am more than content. I'm like, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, a month is good because yeah, it's a whole ordeal unpacking to get there, but you're there for a month. So you can settle in. Plus, I mean, there's my family. So like things like you don't need to overpack because you have access to things like laundry machines.
Exactly. Well, that and just actually the beginning of the year, we bought a house and over there, so now we have a permanent home base, which I am tickled to death about.
That's fantastic. Well, like, I don't know what the word is in Japanese, and I'm sure it's not bonsai, but that seems like something to say. Bonsai.
Kampai, probably.
Kampai, is that
All right.
congratulations.
Yeah, pretty well. It's really what you say when you cheer somebody. But well, I'll pick it up from here. But Mr. Jeff, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you answering these questions, going through a little bit of what garden is and how you view the world and how you approach different topics. It has been absolutely fantastic. If you would like to tell people how they can find you and your podcast, I would thoroughly appreciate that.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. Thank you for, I mean, the questions were, I mean, they weren't easy to answer, but they weren't hard questions either. I mean, if anyone should answer them, it should be me. So I am still on the X. I still call it Twitter. I have two accounts there. One is at Icarus Fell MD. Icarus, like the guy who flew too close to the sun, fell, FELL, because he fell, and MD Maryland, because that's where I live. There's another one that's at dose_evil. I'm warning you that is mostly wrestling nonsense or wrestling non-nonsense, because I'm very much into the business and the legal stuff that's in wrestling. That's sort of what I'm known for in that world, so to speak. But if you like wrestling or you think you might be interested in it, you can give me a follow there too. I'm on Facebook, just under my name, Jeff Lippman, Jeffrey Lippman. And that's fine too. If you look like a real person, I'll probably accept you. And if I don't, send me a message on Messenger and say, I heard you on Southern Demonology. And I think that, we have things to talk about. And I'd happily accept people like that. Aside from that, you can go to any of your major podcast platforms, including Audible, and just type in Garden of Thought. And like I said, you'll generally get 2 to 3 shows a week. If you do like wrestling, I guessed on a lot of shows, but I'm not going to bore anyone with that. I'm pretty tied to the Wrestling Soup Network. In fact, all my shows can be found on the Wrestling Soup Network, which is weird because most of them aren't wrestling, but like I said, I'm pretty tied to them. I do a show with the legendary Lufisto, female wrestler. She's now retired, but runs a promotion. And we review the show LFG, which is sort of like WWE's reality tough enough kind of competition show. And we've had 3 episodes, and it's on the regular Wrestling Soup Big Boy feed. It's been very well received. And then I do a show on sort of an ancillary feed called Wrestling Soup and Friendos. Yes, Friendos. And me and this guy, White Chocolate, who is neither white nor chocolate, review a show called Evolve, which is basically WWE's single A show with a lot of indie wrestlers and NIL, like basically college athletes and pro athletes who are training to be wrestlers, and that's on Tubi. And I think we're the only show that does LFG, and I think we're the only show that does Evolve, and that's called Dose of Chocolate. So you can find those. But anyway, if you're looking for anything on me, if you'll find it on X and Facebook. So there you go. And I do things like this. I love being a guest, and I love meeting people who have podcasts because they can also be guests. And guests, I'm a big believer, just like the Bible, begetting and begatting. Guests beget guests.
That would be highly, highly accurate. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The absolute best part about podcasting has been the people and the network that you create and the meaningful interactions that you have while doing so. It's just been absolutely amazing. And you are definitely one of those, and I greatly appreciate it, sir.
I appreciate you thinking that, because I'm tickled pink that I know a scholarly person of your background, education, and knowledge, and that you hold me in that regard is again, it's very gratifying and very validating, and I can't wait to have you back on again. And I hope that you're still planning that panel thing, and if that can happen, I'm tickled pink to even be considered a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And remind me to pay you the money I owe you for saying all the nice things about me.
But yeah, I'm taking Canadian dollars now.
Okay, there you go. Well, everyone, thank you very much for listening. As always, all of his contact information will be in the show notes. So if you missed anything, you can find it there. And otherwise, give us a like, a follow, and tell your friends about Southern Demonology. I would thoroughly appreciate that. Go check out Garden of Thought, and I know that you're going to have a good time doing so. Thank you for listening to Southern Demonology. Find us online at southerndemonology.com, which offers links to all of our social media and episodes. Southern Demonology is solely owned, produced, and edited by myself, and the intro and outro music are composed by me as well. If you have a moment, please rate, like, and share this podcast, as it is the best way to help support my work. As always, I am JJ, and it has been a pleasure to speak to you today.